Welcome to the Wknd Warriors Fishing Podcast, presented by 13 Fishing Canada. Make your own luck. We're here to scratch that angling itch and talk everything fishing. Join us as we sit down with special guests from across the industry. Now, here's your hosts, Brandon Cater and Logan Lewis.
How's it going, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in to our first ever bite. My name is Brandon, and I'm here with my buddy Logan. How's it going, Logan?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Oh, not too bad. I'm just kind of pretty excited to get this rolling with you. I know we've had this in the works for a while. It was exciting to have our first guest sit down with us, and I think it's going to be a pretty good episode. I think people are going to enjoy it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess we may as well introduce our guest right now. For the first bite, we have Shayna Hamilton. It's a very good interview, kind of get into things. She's a big advocate for the female anglers, so we kind of get into those topics. We talk about research, seeing as she's part of the Saskatchewan Sportfish Research Group and whatnot, and just some really interesting topics that I think you guys will enjoy for our first ever bite.
Yeah, absolutely, Shayna. It was fantastic to talk to you. But before we jump into that episode, we just wanted to give a shout out to our episode sponsor, Wknd Distillers out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. We are all about supporting local, and this company makes some unbelievable products, vodkas. They make whiskeys as well and other types of spirits. If you haven't checked them out, they are available in retailers across the province. If you love Caesars, you're going to want to take a listen to this.
There are certain moments in life that really stick with you. This is definitely one of them. The thrill of the dill, my friends, is not a myth.
Prohibition is over, Saskatchewan. Ask about LB's legendary Birmingham's Dill Pickle Vodka. After all, it's not a party until someone pulls out the pickle. Tours and tastings available. Call or stop by 814 47th Street East. And tonight, why not mix your Caesar with some Lucky Bastard?
It's the one with the pickle in it.
If you are looking for any quality spirits, vodkas especially, they do have a ton of options on their website at luckybastard.ca. Use our code Wknd Warriors. It'll be down in the show notes below, and you can save 10% off your order. They do ship Canada-wide, so be sure to check them out online and in your nearest retailer if you are from Saskatchewan.
And without further ado, here's Shayna Hamilton from the Saskatchewan Sportfish Research Group.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess just to start off, I think it'd be a good idea if we could get you to introduce yourself, kind of where you're from, your background, and kind of how you ended up where you are today with everything you got going on with school and whatnot.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I grew up in the southeastern part of Saskatchewan. I grew up in a hunting family. I actually did not really get into fishing until I was well into my university undergrad degree. But definitely grew up with just a passion for the outdoors, that drive to be out as much as I possibly could. And the focus was just more on the hunting side. And so I knew pretty early on that I wanted to work with animals and specifically wildlife in some form or another. So I ended up deciding on doing a biology degree to be a scientist. And that took me to the University of Regina, where I've been for the past 7 years now. So I started off in an undergrad biology degree, and I had an area of concentration in ecology and environmental biology, which essentially just means that I took a specific set of classes that were ecology focused to get my biology degree, as opposed to something more like pre-med. And while I was in university, I had 4 different summer jobs. They were all fantastic. I started out in the wildlife side of things, where I had some summer student jobs working with endangered species and habitat conservation. So I worked with piping plovers, burrowing owls, loggerhead shrike, all sorts of different species in the province. And then I started to realize that wildlife jobs in Canada are extremely competitive. You almost need like a PhD minimum to even kind of be considered for some of those positions. And so I decided I wanted to shift focus away from wildlife a little bit more, and focus on a different area. And so I wasn't quite sure what that was going to be. My next summer job was working with a research lab at the U of R that did research on bats in the province. And so specifically, I was working on a bat and wind energy project. So I got to catch a whole bunch of different bat species, which was really cool. But I am not a night person. I like to sleep when it's dark. And so having to work from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. did not fit my lifestyle at all. So I very, very quickly exited. Yeah, so and then after the bat work, I had agreed to do a 1 semester research project with my current supervisor, Dr. Chris Summers, who's a professor at the U of R. He's also the leader of the Saskatchewan Sportfish Research Group. And it was basically, I'd wanted to get a fisheries job that whole time because I figured I'd really like it. It just hadn't happened. So I decided to do a research project on it as like a way to get experience. And I ended up absolutely loving it. We did a research project on winter tagging of yellow perch on Buffalo Pound. And so that was actually how the winter tagging portion of the group got started.
Yeah, so I guess I'll mention we had some technical difficulties. Now we're back on track kind of thing. And then, so I guess you said that you were kind of around how you first started with the research group. Is that right?
Yeah, so I took on that winter tagging project to kind of get some experience with fisheries, and I ended up really falling in love with fishing and angling specifically. I hadn't honestly really done it that much before that point, but I started to not only do it for work, but also pick up angling in my free time as well.
I think that's a pretty common thing, right? Like a lot of people that haven't fished before give it a chance, or somebody asks them to go fishing, they go fishing thinking this is going to be boring, and then they do it and they're like, oh my god, like I really like this, like this is pretty cool.
Oh, definitely. Like I basically didn't really have anybody in my friend circle or my family circle that was a big angler.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have any access to it essentially. And then by joining the research team there and doing research with them, it kind of gave me the access. And then I also met new people and made new friends who were into fishing, and that kind of just catapulted it really.
Yeah, and
Nice.
that's a big thing. I mean, that's kind of how Logan and I met too, right? Through fishing. Yeah, there's so many different avenues that fishing can take you. It's just a matter of giving it a chance and seeing where it goes.
Definitely, and just people being willing to like talk with people who are new, or give them advice, give them tips, or even just take new people out type thing. I think that's huge.
So I guess it was, you were mentioning before we had the troubles there, that it was kind of when you came on that the winter tagging kind of started.
Yeah, so the Saskatchewan Sportfish Research Group primarily focuses on mark recapture tagging, which is just a scientific term for we put some unique code on the fish, and we do that using a tag, and then you study them long term. So when I joined the lab in 2017, they had been doing this tagging at tournaments previously for the past 2 years prior, but they hadn't done any tagging at all during the winter field season. And so we kind of used my project as a way to get some fisheries research experience for me, but then also to be a pilot for winter tagging to see, like what kind of safety equipment do we need? It's a whole different suite of variables to deal with, including ice and cold and all that kind of stuff. And so we really wanted to see, like, is this feasible from a research perspective? And then what are the different kinds of questions that can open up about our data set?
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically to get on, or not to get on the team kind of thing, but to become part of that research group, you have to be kind of bringing in your own research topic. Is that how it kind of works?
So the research topic is decided on between the student and the supervisor. To be on the Sportfish Research Group, you do have to be a university student to join up. Unfortunately, we're not at a point where we can train anglers externally to get us to tag. I know other places do that with like sturgeon in BC and stuff. And I also know in the East Coast, they have some people trained up there. There's just a lot of red tape that we run into on our end to get that process going. I personally would love to see that happen. I just don't know how realistic it is right now.
Right. Yeah. So I guess when you look at the other people that are also in the group, this isn't this isn't something that like you're taking a biology 400 kind of thing and then now you're part of the research group. Like you have kind of some area of study or area that you're focusing on that kind of pulls you into the group.
Yeah, so my first experience with the research, the winter tagging, was actually for an undergrad course, and it's specifically called Independent Research in Biology. So it's a 1-semester course where you and your supervisor has to agree to take you on, and then you decide on a 1-semester research project. And so mine was the behavior and oh gosh, ugh. Okay, scratch that part. And so my research project was essentially looking at age and growth structure of yellow perch through the angling, winter angling scope. So that's how I got started in the lab. How I've continued in the lab was I transitioned from once I finished my undergrad degree, which was the next semester. I did start my master's in the lab. And so as part of my agreement for doing the master's, I also work with the tagging program.
Okay, sweet.
So you have to be a student to be part of the Sportfish group.
Yes,
okay.
You do.
See, I think that's one thing that I didn't realize. So I think that's a cool twist. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that it'd be super cool to be able to externally train anglers to tag fish and be a part of that group as well in the future. But yeah, that's kind of a cool behind the scene things I didn't know.
Yeah, so anybody you see like on our Facebook page or anything like that, they're all students of various capacities. So sometimes we have undergrad students who are only there for a semester. Almost all of the master's students in the lab work on this. And then Dr. Summers, the professor, is kind of the one constant. So he is kind of the sole person in charge, and then we just all kind of work and help out wherever we can. A lot of us are actually people who angle in our free time and genuinely enjoy the work, so we're very quick to volunteer for any tagging efforts that need to happen.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a big plus. But yeah, right now there isn't a student that's tied to the tagging program, so it's not just for one single thesis or anything like that. It's really a long-term project.
So, Shane, I guess one of the big questions I had was, how do you report a tagged fish if you were to catch one with a tag in it, and kind of what you guys do with that information?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of some key pieces that we absolutely need when you're reporting a tagged fish, and then there's some optional data that you can choose whether or not you'd like to submit. So first off, we need the tag number, which every tag has a unique number on it, and we also need the color of the tag. If you catch a tagged fish, there should be some sort of contact information on the tag. Over time, they do get some algae buildup, so you might have to scrape it with your fingernail, but it will be on that tag of who to contact, because there are others that tag other than just us in the province. So first of all, we need the tag number, we need the tag color, we need the species that you caught, and where you caught it, so which water body. And then after that, some optional information. You can tell us if that fish was kept or released, which you do not have to release tagged fish by any means. I think there is a little bit of a bias where people are more willing to release a tagged fish than not tagged fish of the same size. So you definitely are more than welcome to keep it if you like. We just would like to know if that fish is still out there swimming or not. You can also send any growth or metrics or information, so anything like lengths, weights, circumference, kind of, if that's something that you take, and then also pictures. We do love to get pictures from people. If you want to tell us what you caught it on, the GPS location of where you caught it, that's obviously not required at all, but it can kind of help us pinpoint how far it
Send you the waypoints.
Yeah, we I promise we don't share them. Yeah. So, I mean, we might take a look at them and we might do a cruise by, but no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so that's essentially what we're asking for to report them. If you catch one of our tags, it gets reported to chris.summers@uregina.ca. But once again, that contact information is on the tag. And then in terms of questions, market capture is a long-term study, so it does take time to build up enough data to start answering the trends and looking into what we can actually see. And we're kind of just starting to approach that point in this project. So we're very close to hitting 10,000 tagged fish,
Oh, wow.
which is fantastic, spread out across Saskatchewan water bodies, primarily targeting lakes that have tournaments on them, just because that's how this tagging program got started. It was very heavily reliant on tournaments. So with that, definitely some questions that you can answer are things like, what is the probability of being recaptured as a fish, and does that vary across the species? Does that vary by size? Are certain individuals more likely to be recaptured than others? We do take note of any injuries or stressors. So if there's signs of barotrauma, if there's signs of gill bleeding, if there's a hooking injury. So in the future, we'll be able to say, do any of those potentially impact the likelihood of being recaptured?
Yeah.
We can't ever prove that a fish is dead unless it literally washes up shore with the tag still in it. But that can kind of give us some insight into how much of an issue those stressors can be. The other thing we look at is seasonality. So does a fish tagged in the winter get caught in the summer and vice versa? And we already have some preliminary results that they do. So, these fish are contributing to multiple angling seasons. We can look at recapture locations. So how far did they travel from where we tagged them originally? How long of a period does it take for them to get recaptured? Sometimes fish are recaptured the next day. Sometimes they're not recaptured for over 3 years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they just appear. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff with that. When we have growth data, we can start to look at some kind of growth trends. So how much typically are fish growing each year in the different size classes. For a while, we were taking some aging subsets for different research projects. So we were able to correlate age and length with some lakes. You can look at harvest rates. So, is there certain sizes that are more likely to be harvested than not? And across species, once again, with all of that. There are so many questions that you can start to answer once you get all the data in. It's just this type of research, it takes a long time to get enough data to answer those questions. So you're looking kind of on the order of like 10 years to really be able to, from a science perspective, to start answering those questions.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand is the time that it takes to actually put this data together to actually give an accurate, solution, or I don't know what's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, there's a very big difference between a scientific finding and an observation.
Yeah.
We can observe things and observe trends, but to actually determine if that's that is what's happening scientifically is a much different process. I'm sure most people are familiar by now that any of the academic papers or scientific papers that are published are peer reviewed. That's a process that can take over a year just to go through. And it's just kind of that reassurance that none of the data was fudged. Like, this is actually what they found. It's verified by other industry leaders that this is a valid result and contributes to our knowledge on the science. So there is a whole process with that. And unfortunately, I think that also creates a little bit of a disconnect between when the data is actually collected as opposed to when the information becomes available through these research journals. And then there's also the issue of most of those journals being behind a paywall. And so that's where science communication can be a really big factor. It's something that I personally am very passionate about. I got into biology because I saw the angler and hunter frustrations, and I understood science, the decision making behind it, and I could see how they were both fighting for the same thing, but using different words and terms and not able to understand each other. And when you're able to be that in between and explain both sides in the language that each side understands, you can kind of mend that disconnect, and you realize you're fighting for the same thing. You just have to be able to understand each other. So for me personally, that's a big reason why I'm very vocal around these kind of topics, is that I know that once we start communicating with each other, anglers and managers want the exact same thing, and it just is going to take a little bit of understanding and somebody to kind of do the translating to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the sport needs people like you, and the Sportfish Research Group to, make sure that these fisheries are sustainable and are going to be providing a healthy ecosystem for years to come and generations to come to enjoy. And I think there's a lot of interesting topics that a lot of people don't necessarily know about our fisheries right here in Saskatchewan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think another vital point is that this mark recapture study isn't possible without the participation of anglers. If anglers weren't out there sending in their recapture reports, we would never be able to have the data set or answer these questions. So it's a two-way street. Anglers have just as much information to give as scientists have to give back, and that really ties into that conversation of, I believe every angler is a scientist. There's just a little bit of differences in whether or not you write your observations down and how you approach the learning aspect of it.
Yeah, and that's where I think you come in huge as well with the research, and is another reason I thought you'd be good on the podcast, is that you are able to relate it to us non-scientific people. You're able to make it make sense, basically, so we can kind of connect the dots and understand the findings that you guys do get through these kind of research programs.
No, absolutely. Yeah, anglers, you're all just playing with animal behavior. I just happen to study it.
Yeah, exactly.
You hear that, everybody listening? You're a scientist. Gotcha.
Sweet. So I guess that you mentioned the thesis there. I guess I know a little bit about yours, but for the people listening, what was yours focused on there?
Yeah, so I am just at the tail end of my master's degree, so I'm in the writing stage of my thesis.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, so when I joined the lab as a master's student, I joined in 2018, which was coincidentally the same year that Prussian carp were discovered in Saskatchewan. And for people who aren't familiar, Prussian carp are an invasive species of carp that were only discovered in North America in the early 2000s, and they were introduced into Alberta. And so in 2018, they were found in a significant population size in a small lake by Lake Diefenbaker. It's called Stockwell Lake. And they had already made it that far inland, basically undetected, and established themselves, and we knew essentially nothing about them in a North American context. They're very invasive throughout most of continental Europe, and they're native to Asia and Eastern Europe. But from a North American's perspective, there was actually only 3 papers published when I started my research on Prussian carp, so we really don't know much about them in terms of how they interact with our ecosystem and our species of fish.
Sweet. I think one thing that I definitely had a bone to pick with that we've talked about before is, can you please explain the difference between a Prussian carp, a common carp, and a bigmouth buffalo for the people who seem to know on Facebook?
Absolutely. So yeah, part of my thesis, I did run a citizen science program that will be continuing with the grad student who's taking over from me. But we asked anglers to submit photos if they thought they caught a Prussian carp. And we expected that there was going to be some identification challenges. Obviously, not everybody out there is a trained fisheries biologist with ID courses and all that kind of stuff. But I think we also maybe underestimated a little bit where that average level was. So that also created some really unique opportunities for us, because we saw a real area to start educating people on just some basic fish identification skills. So for Prussian carp, common carp, and bigmouth buffalo was the other one?
Yes.
Yeah. So the biggest difference is going to be size and barbels or whiskers. So Prussian carp are very, very small fish. They are super closely related to goldfish. Consider them kind of cousins in that sense. So you will not get a Prussian carp that's bigger than like 3 pounds and probably no bigger than about 55 centimeters, which is kind of close to that 20-inch mark type thing. So if it's any bigger than that, you can almost guarantee that you're not dealing with a Prussian carp. Common carp and bigmouth buffalo, on the other hand, do get over that size range, so you're much more likely to be dealing with one of those two species when you have a larger fish. So they're all part of the same family, which is the Cyprinidae family. They're all carp. But the other difference that you can tell them apart is barbels, or whiskers in the corner of the mouth. So common carp have barbels. Prussian carp and bigmouth buffalo do not. The other kind of way to differentiate between common carp and bigmouth buffalo is that they have solid black eyes. Bigmouth buffalo do, common carp don't. So that's definitely one way you can tell them apart. And then I'd have to double check this, but I believe there's also some difference with the dorsal fin shape between common carp and bigmouth buffalo.
Yeah, I'll have to send you a picture, because my first time out on the ice this season, I went out with a buddy. And, he's reeling it in. He's, it's pulling drag. He thinks he's got a big walleye. And he pulls it up onto the ice. And I swore it was a carp, but it almost kind of looked more silvery. And we both weren't sure what it was. I think it was a bigmouth buffalo, but I'm not positive. So There definitely is a little bit of difficulty distinguishing, between the species there. So, like, I had never seen one I've never seen a bigmouth buffalo prior. So, I mean, for me,
and
it was hard to
what lake
determine.
were you guys on?
We were on Pasco Lake.
Okay, yeah. So that's another part. Bigmouth buffalo are only in the Qu'Appelle chain.
Okay.
And then Prussian carp right now, as far as we've determined through my research, is only in the South Saskatchewan River system.
Okay.
So there really shouldn't be much overlap. That obviously can definitely change if Prussian carp ever get into the Qu'Appelle chain.
Yeah.
But as of right now, there is a little bit of a geographical barrier between the two.
Okay. So it was a bigmouth buffalo, basically, is what you're telling me.
Most likely. Definitely send me the picture, though, because I love to help people with fish identification. I'll do the best that I can to help you out. We also have 4 different species of sucker in the province.
Yeah.
And one species that is considered a carp sucker.
Well, there you go.
There's a lot more species out there than your typical sport fish, so to say. So
I think.
So,
sorry, I think that's another thing too, right? So a lot of anglers. To them, there's only, the walleye, the perch, the pike, and then, if you had, Diefenbaker, you got your rainbows and whatever. But typically, it's those 3 common species: the walleye, the perch, the pike. There's a lot of species in this province.
Yeah,
there's 27.
I think if you include, it depends on how detailed you want to go. If you include all of the minnow species, there's quite a few more. I think, like 27 or 28 are considered catchable by rod and reel.
Yeah, so that's outstanding. Like, in my eyes, that's outstanding that somebody could travel around our province right here in the prairies and potentially catch 27 different fish.
And that the majority of them are relatively unknown by anglers as well.
Exactly.
So I got a bone to pick that grinds my gears. The bigmouth buffalo is considered protected, right?
Yes.
Okay. So all I have to say is, for the people online, if you're going to tell someone to kill a fish, make sure that you can identify it. Not that you should even be killing it, because that's also illegal just to waste it. But if someone uploads a picture of a bigmouth buffalo and you're telling them it's a common carp and tell them to throw it on shore, that ain't right. That's just my bone to pick. I see it way too much.
You don't want to get on Logan's bad side.
Oh yeah, I'm scary. Scary guy.
No, I think that's a really good point. Obviously, everyone is concerned about invasive species and their potential impact on our fisheries and on our desired species. But identification is a really key aspect of that, because if if you aren't confident in your proper identification, you could be removing native species that really are supposed to be there and are an integral part of the ecosystem. So definitely, if you have ID questions, reach out to people who have some experience. There's nothing wrong with asking for a second opinion. I know I'm more than happy to help out with things like that. And yeah, we definitely want to be aware of invasive carp in our province, but just don't be so quick to just get rid of them all.
That was a much nicer way of saying what I just said.
This is a little like off topic, away from like the big mouth buffalo and carp. What I am curious, Shayna, what are your opinions on Cisco or Tulabee? Because there's been numerous times that I've gone out to a lake around Regina here, and there's just a pile of Tulabee, and people are catching them and they're just piling them on the ice and just letting them die. So, people say, "Oh, there's worms in them," or they're hurtful to our fisheries, or but then you hear people saying, "No, they're absolutely crucial to our fisheries. These fish eat them, yada yada yada." So, what's your take on the Cisco or the Tulabee?
That's a really good point. I am definitely personally team. They are an important part of our ecosystem. Obviously, they're not a fish that people are necessarily going to target to eat. But just because you don't eat them doesn't mean they don't also serve the ecosystem and benefit. I think a lot of it is you can catch a lot of Cisco out on the ice when you feel like you should be catching walleye instead. And I think that can maybe lead to a sense of there's some sort of overpopulation, or they're just super abundant, and so it's not going to matter if I toss these on the ice to die because there's so many of them because I catch them so often. When actually we know very little about the population structure of Cisco, like especially in the chain lakes and in there. So we have actually started tagging them to start to try to learn a little bit more about them.
Oh wow!
And so far we've tagged a decent number, and we have not had a recapture yet.
Oh
So
really?
it could be that populations are very high, but Cisco are considered a major prey source for walleye, and you often see them in the lakes that are associated with trophy-sized walleye. And by trophy-sized, I mean kind of that 8 pounds and above.
Yep.
Definitely, they are a food source for walleye. I think a lot of the things too is that in Saskatchewan we get very, very large Cisco. Tulabee is interchangeable there. You actually don't see that in other parts of North America. Cisco in Eastern Canada stay very small and kind of never reach that kind of small whitefish size that we see here in the province. So
Yeah, that's
there's
a
a little
common
bit of a
comparison.
different geographical reason there, and so we catch the large ones on rod and reel, but it's really those small ones that are feeding the basis of the food chain. You just don't catch them.
Yeah, you hear a lot of guys, that do catch the smaller Tulabee, maybe are keeping them and using them for pike bait or something of that sort. But yeah, like I mean, I was on Last Mountain Lake a couple weeks ago, and me and my buddy, we caught a couple big walleye. But leading up to those walleye, I caught 2 or 3 Tulabee, and I'm pretty sure I was recording a video. I'm pretty sure I said in the video, I was like, "Oh, that's a good sign. There's Tulabee here. There's got to be walleye." So thank you for confirming that. I wasn't positive when I said that.
No, not a problem. Yeah, so it's definitely my opinion that they are beneficial to your lake. Like any fish, obviously, if there's some sort of really extreme population imbalance, that's an indicator of an ecosystem issue, but it's not that the species itself is necessarily an issue. There's a whole bunch of different factors that can go into things like that, and that's what the fisheries managers do best to figure that out. But yes, essentially, Cisco are good. It's illegal to waste fish. It's perfectly legal to keep it as tip-up bait. I personally, if I get a small enough one, I definitely do, because you can catch some massive pike using Cisco as bait because they're a bait species.
Absolutely. And like to go to a gas station and buy big, herring or smelts, like it's expensive. So, I mean, if you're catching those smaller Cisco, those are probably your best bet. And it's going to save you a few bucks too.
It's also a
First hot
natural
tip
prey
of the
source.
podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, we actually bringing something to the table. Yeah, I would say my personal opinion is unless the government has some sort of mandatory retention on a fish and you don't intend on using it for bait legally or eating it, what are you doing? Just tossing it on the ice or on the shore and just leaving it to die like that. That's
Yeah.
kind of goes in with the whole carp thing too. I get that there's a different opinion on the carp and stuff like that than I might have, but I think that like I've heard stories of at Buffalo about burbot being left on the ice back like many years ago kind of thing, just because people thought they were gross and stuff like that, or
And now
I find suckers on the ice.
they're
And
a target species. Burbot are a target species. People go
they're
out.
my favorite species.
Yeah, they're your favorite species. I know that. And it's like, what are you guys? Yeah, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you'd hear guys catching dogfish or burbot, and it was the grossest thing. Or, oh my god, I thought it was a big walleye the way it was fighting, and then they were disappointed. But now you go out and you go out in the evening or for the night bite or camp on the ice, and people specifically target big burbot. Actually, I think the world record burbot was caught in Diefenbaker by I think one of the Conrad brothers from Fishing Geeks. So
You think correctly.
you know what I mean? So I mean, burbot are a target species, and not only are they a target species here in Saskatchewan, but Saskatchewan has some of the largest burbot in the world.
Absolutely.
We're built different.
Yeah, and I think too, like my advice to experienced anglers, new anglers, anyone who's just like you hear all the advice online from the different camps, and you're just not sure what to do. If you don't know, let it go. Take a picture of it, get a second opinion after the fact, but even if it is an invasive, as much as we want to remove them, in the grand scheme of things, unless it's something that's only been introduced one or two individuals, it's not going to be the make or break with that species getting away. We definitely want to remove them as much as possible when we've identified them, but if you don't know, just let it go.
Exactly, because even if you, or I guess if you are wrong and you don't know, like I watched a thing from Meat Eater on the big mouth buffalo that they have down in the States, and some of those fish were 80 plus years old and big gaps in between when they were reproducing and whatnot. So you might think that you're taking out one of the millions of common carp out here when really you're taking out one of those special big mouth buffalo. And I guess not realizing that you're doing it, but that could cause some harm.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we've kind of covered that topic pretty well. I guess one thing that checking out your Instagram, sh_outdoors_ is the whole female angler scene and just, I guess, female outdoors scene kind of thing. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. What do you want to know about it?
I guess it's not something you see a lot, but I think it is an awesome thing to see more and more of. And I think that's a great thing that social media has kind of brought forward is it's not just old grumpy men out on a bucket on the ice, or it's not just old grumpy men up in a tree stand waiting for a deer kind of thing. So I guess just talk about maybe some of the people you've met and things like that, or kind of what it's brought to you in your fishing and hunting.
No, absolutely. I think you raise a great point. It's no longer the old grandpa game anymore, if I may be so bold as to say that. I got into the hunting scene from a very early age. I started competitive archery when I was pre-teens type thing. I've been shooting a bow since I was 5 years old, going to the 3D tournaments and all that kind of stuff. And it really was just kind of a part of who I am. And it still is to this day. And when getting into fishing, it was kind of the similar story of it was predominantly like male dominated, but we're definitely in a shifting period where more and more women are either seeking the opportunity to get involved, or it's just become more accessible for them to get involved as well. So we're seeing a real kind of shift. I know in the archery world, after the Hunger Games movie with Katniss, there was a huge upspike in the amount of girls and women who are getting into archery. And I think just it's an industry trend in general. Women are probably the largest growing aspect of the outdoor demographic right now because they traditionally haven't been included in that. So you get the entire age range of people who are getting into it.
I think, yeah, and right. So like your reference to the Hunger Games and how that movie had an effect on archery. That's kind of the effect that social media is having. I feel like on the industry and women in the industry. And I mean, obviously, we want to see it. We want to see more and more of that in every industry, right? And we want equalization everywhere. But you hear so many people saying how negative social media is, and don't get me wrong, there's a ton of negativity and internet trolls and stuff on social media, but social media has definitely brought women in fishing a long ways in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You know what? Social media has brought fishing in general a long way. It's, fishing used to be, like you said, the old man sport or the boring sport, but now with a younger generation, females, and all the photo and video and YouTube, it's cool, right? Everybody's making fishing look so cool, and it's cool to catch and release fish and catch species that you've never caught before and show that on social media and just be a part of an industry that is so diverse now.
Absolutely. And kind of a personal goal of mine has always been just to kind of be an example that it is possible for you to be a 5'3" female and set up your own shack and drill your own holes. And yeah, you might have to figure out some tricks and make some things work for you that are easy for people who are stronger, but it's definitely still possible. And the other thing too is that there is a community of females who are out there who love the outdoors just as much as anybody else does. And social media is I think one of the best ways to find that community, because often we like to be outdoors. We tend to be quite rural and spread out across the entire continent. And so through social media, some of the girls in the hunting and fishing world that I talk to most, I've never met in person. They're all found through online friendships, but they're so supportive. They're so encouraging. They're just so excited that other women are getting into it. And it's definitely something I feel as well. Like, you get so excited when you see another girl out there, and it doesn't matter if she caught her PB walleye and it's only 12 inches. Like, you're just so pumped because you know what that feeling is like. And on the other end too is that women do sometimes get criticisms or creepy messages and kind of other things. You also know what it takes to stay in it as well. So there's kind of that little bit of an added layer where we do have to kind of weed through and block some people to maintain our little spot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For the people doing that, don't be that guy. And I could tell you from firsthand knowledge that Shayna can come out and kick it just as well as anyone else can. Like the day we went out, it didn't seem
kick your ass.
Well, she could do that too, but like that day we went out ice fishing there, it's not like it was anything different. Like I was saying to Justin that we were with there, like lots of times when you do take a girl out, it's you're doing a lot more than just worrying about yourself, right? But like, not that we expected that from you, because we kind of knew what to expect coming from you just from your content and stuff like that. And I was like, that was just like being out there with another one of the guys kind of thing, and it was awesome. Like I had a ton of fun that day, and it didn't seem different at all, which it shouldn't seem different. But I think people tend to think that just because you're out there with a girl, especially in a male dominated kind of thing, that they think it's going to be different, but it wasn't at all. So
I think that's a great point that you bring up. For the guys out there who maybe want to get their girlfriend or their wife into it, or their daughter, or, just a friend that's expressed interest, but they don't really know how it's going to work because they're a girl and like, cooties, anything else type thing. It doesn't have to be any different. You don't have to hold our hands and, hold our hair or anything like that to have us be out there fishing. If we want to, we're going to do it. You can offer for some of the kind of traditional things like lugging the sled all the way out there. I mean, we can probably hold our own, but it's always nice to offer if you're not sure. I think one of the biggest things that I've figured out is we we as women tend to be very cold. So
Amen.
that might men too. There's definitely I got a lot of messages actually after saying, excuse me, I am a man and I get super cold too. So I think it's a human problem, but it kind of seems to come up a little bit more that it's a girl thing. But if that's the case, like maybe you set up the shack, and if you don't want to fish in the shack, don't fish in the shack. But like that might be what it takes to get her out that first little bit. But as she gets invested and interested in it, and upgrade some gear, get some base layers, the heat warmers. She might just be out there just as much as you are, and before you know it, you'll be hole hopping all day across the entirety of Last Mountain Lake catching bigs.
Exactly. Yeah,
Well,
that's the thing that's different is with you, it's if you wanted to, you'd go out by yourself, right?
Yeah.
Or lots of those other girls that you're talking about that you've met online kind of thing, they will go out by themselves. And that's where I think that's where things are changing for the better too, right? Like usually it's a guy accompanied by his girlfriend or something like that. But with the fact that you actually go out by yourself if you wanted to, I think is a huge step in the right direction too.
for
And I
those,
think just typically for women entering a male dominated industry, there's a lot of intimidation that goes into it. So there's a lot of not necessarily knowing what to do or what to get. And there is sometimes when we reach out, we get the like, oh, why don't you just get your dad to pick this out for you? Or like, why don't you just get your husband to do that instead? There can be kind of some backlash that can be discouraging. I think that's changing positively for the better, that people are much more approachable. There's also some different kind of quote unquote celebrity figures, like the girlfriends and the wives of the big YouTube people are all super friendly and more than willing to answer questions. And so as a woman, you may not feel comfortable approaching like Jay, but you might feel approachable sending Sam a message because you feel like there's some sort of connection there.
oh,
Exactly.
absolutely. And yeah, like you're seeing it more and more, like all these big YouTubers and these channels, like they're great people. They're, if you shoot them a DM and you have a question, if you're new to the sport, they're very, very open to, sending you a message back and kind of helping you out. And, for yourself, like, yeah, there's like, Sam, like Jay's wife and Nicole Stone. And there's so many females getting into the media side of things as well. Like there's so much opportunity in the industry for females. And
Absolutely. And the other thing I would say too is that it's really easy to look at somebody's follower count and assume that because it's high, there's some sort of unreachable celebrity figure. Some of the most helpful women I've reached out to have over 50,000 followers, but they still answer every DM, every question. They'll even reach out to you and like say, "Hey, I saw your picture. Like, way to go! Like, how'd your day go?" and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like you have this moment where you're like, wow, like this person is talking to me. And then you remember we're all just humans. We're all people behind a screen and behind an account. And for the most part, we're all pretty friendly too. So definitely, I'm always down to talk about fishing or hunting or anything outdoor related. And it's just that access thing, because there are more women putting their stuff out there on social media. There's more accounts to find. There's more people to ask questions to, and it's just getting a lot more approachable.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. I don't really think too much of the number of followers I have, and it might be more than average kind of thing, but to me,
subtle
it doesn't
brag.
make me think any. No, no, no. I'm getting to the point. I'm getting to the point. I'm just saying that I've had people like you said, I answer every DM and stuff like that, and I just figure there's no reason not to be nice kind of thing unless you come at me that way. But I've had people say like, "Oh, thanks so much for answering me" and stuff like that. Like, "Oh, that's cool that you answered." I'm like, honestly, it's that number, no matter what account it is, that number for who the person is doesn't really matter. Like, you could, I don't know. It's just, to me, I have had that too when I'm talking to bigger accounts as well, or like a bigger YouTuber that you watch and stuff. You are nervous about it, but behind those numbers, it's just a person just the same as you. So it shouldn't be you shouldn't be too scared, but everyone kind of is nervous when they are talking to those kind of things.
I think what it comes down to is, we all fish because we like to fish. We all are in the industry or trying to get into the industry somehow because we want to help other people enjoy it as much as we do and learn. For me, it's about learning with everybody else. Like, I am by no means, I have no idea what I'm doing half the time. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I just like to take photos, make videos. I love to fish. And you know what? If I'm going to post something and I do something wrong, somebody's going to comment on that and say, hey, maybe do this next time, or hey, maybe use this knot next time, or something I didn't know, right? I'm just here to learn with everybody else. If I can help somebody along the way, or somebody has a question, they slide into my DMs, that's exactly what I'm here for, right? It's just to learn.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to reach out, because what's the worst that happens? They don't answer, right? Like, that's so that some people are like that, and that can happen, but that's nothing. That's just what it is, kind of thing. But I'd say don't be afraid, because that's how, like, I met Shayna through Instagram, met you, Brandon, through Instagram.
Yep.
Like, you never know where something could lead you, kind of thing. So
yeah,
Absolutely.
endless opportunities.
Yeah. So I guess
we kind of went off on a little tangent about social media.
yeah,
Yeah,
little
definitely.
rant. But that's what the conversation's about.
I guess my final advice for people who maybe are interested in getting more female anglers into it, I think it's probably better to go for quantity over quality. And by that I mean it's kind of the same with any new person you're introducing to angling. But if you can get them on numbers as opposed to size, I am way more excited to go out and sit on my pail and catch 50 perch in a few hours and then head home. It's a lot more daunting for me to want to spend 10 hours on Last Mountain Lake and maybe catch one 8-pound fish. Like, that's just less desirable for me. And that might just be me as a person individually too.
Yep.
But definitely if you're thinking about wanting to get that woman in your life into fishing, get her on a good solid bite, get her hooked, and then you can have your fun with it after.
Pun intended or no?
Oh, not intended, but now intended.
But like, even for me, like, for those of you that haven't listened to our intro episode, 3 years ago, my girlfriend's the one that got me into ice fishing. I had never ice fished in my life 3 years ago.
That's awesome.
Right? And you know what? I met her, and I had some situation where I had a winter activity kind of taken away from me, and I needed to fill some time. So she introduced me to ice fishing. And I thought, you know what, this is the dumbest thing ever. We're going to fall through the ice. This is scary as hell. I don't want to do this. Got out there. I didn't have a sonar. I didn't have any ice fishing equipment, right? So it's like, we're sitting there and I was bored. And then all of a sudden, she goes and grabs a camera and a sonar. And then that takes the interest level to, it spikes it. As soon as I could see marks on the sonar, or I could see a fish on the camera, that got my interest, and I was hooked automatically. So even like the other day, her and I went out, and I have my sonar. She doesn't have one right now. So obviously, right, she's a little bit bored because she has nothing really to look at. So I put my sonar, she took my sonar from me, actually, put it in her hole, and whatever, I fished without the sonar, but she had a heyday. We had a heyday. She caught her first fish of the season. And, it's just like the little things to make it interesting, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing more exciting than having a partner who shares your outdoor interest and your outdoor passion. I'm the same way in my relationship. He's the more hardcore angler. I'm the more hardcore hunter, but we both kind of participate in each other's worlds, and it makes it so much more fun because even if you're not catching, if they get that catch or they get that PB, it's just as exciting for you. So I think that's probably a whole nother topic about having partners and spouses in fishing with you.
Oh, I'm sure we could have a completely separate episode of Love on the Ice or something. we can call that episode Love on the Ice.
The Love
How to
Shack.
get your significant other to come fishing with you.
The Love Shack.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, like
Well, is there any?
I
Oh,
just
sorry.
sorry, I just wanted to touch because yeah, we were talking about women and social media and how there's a lot of women in the industry doing big things. One of the companies that has kind of blown up, I don't know, in the last year here is I think it's called DSG Women's Outerwear. And Shayna, you had some connections there with that company and kind of what they got going on there. Do you want to touch on that a little bit? Like, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, DSG, if people aren't familiar with it, is a female-owned small company that's based out of the States. And they started off in snowmobiling gear.
Yep.
So snowsuits designed for women in that area. Then they expanded into the women in the hunting area, and most recently, last winter, they started with their ice suits for women. Um, if you're a woman looking for an ice suit, especially in the ice fishing world, you're kind of restricted to the three brands. There's Striker, there is DSG, and I'm blanking on the other one.
I think Eskimo and Clam both have women's suits, but like
Okay, yeah.
I think there's only like one suit, whereas like like they have like 3 or 4 different male options and one women's suit, whereas DSG I think has multiple options, right? Because they're just female based.
Yeah, so that's kind of the key difference is that DSG is for women, designed by women. They take into account a lot of the unique sizing and struggles that women come across when ice fishing, because they don't have that male line. Typically, if you have an ice suit from a different company, it's the male version, but maybe a smaller size and maybe a little bit of tailoring in the waist. But other than that, there's not much difference in the design. I do use the ice bib from last year. They did come out with a new version this year, which I know has some upgrades. Just because with it being their first year, they discovered some things that worked and made some improvements on it. So I
Yep.
can't wait to start seeing the reviews from all the ladies about this year's ice suit. But the biggest thing for me is that the ladies' bibs have a drop seat. I'm talking the old-fashioned pajama onesie butt flap. But as a woman, if you need to go to the bathroom on the ice in any other snowsuit, you're basically stripping from the waist down.
Yeah.
And that gets really cold in some very sensitive areas.
Yeah.
So
I
being
can.
able to keep your bibs on, simply unzip the back, you're still kind of covered, so you don't have to like hike it all the way to shore to find a tree to hide behind anymore, or like angle yourself between a door and a shack. It's a lot more manageable and a lot less cold.
I can't really speak from personal experience, but I can only imagine. Like, what I mean? Like, it's just like the little details in those suits go a long ways, especially for female. There's female specific suits, right? So,
Exactly, yeah. Like another big thing is there's a very wide size range in women. I know there is for men too, but we tend to be quite a bit on the shorter side. So they do have an adjustable inseam. It's just a snap system, which makes it really easy, but
yep.
it can fit kind of anybody from a 5'0" kind of up to basically, I think, almost the 6-foot range. They have some different tailoring in terms of making sure that they fit. Our hips tend to be a little bit wider, so they give you a little extra room there. There's an adjustable belt on the waist area because we can often have more hourglass figures, so we need it to be a little snugger there to keep the heat in and everything. But yeah, no, they have great products. They do come out with summer lines now too. They made some awesome UV shirts that were like probably the softest UV shirts that I've found so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then also just because they are so female centric, all of their field staff members, pro staff, field staff, anything like that, are all amazing women who are in the outdoor industry. And so if you're looking for that female community and you haven't found it yet, just go take a look through their page. There's so many women who I've met through that company that are just now some of the greatest friends that I have. Like, we're planning fishing trips as soon as that COVID border opens up, all that. So
You and a lot of
yeah,
people.
no, there's some amazing girls.
Yeah, and I think that's how I heard about it. Right, is through social media, Instagram, influencers, field staff, that type of thing. Pretty much any female angler that's on social media or, you know, in the industry, I mean, DSG is doing a good job of you know, getting their suits on these people and making sure that they're known as a female specific company in all these awesome industries. You know, like you said, there's snowmobile suits, hunting, and then ice fishing. I think those might be the three. So
yeah, no, they do have a Canadian warehouse too, which is awesome. So you don't have to worry about the duties for importing, and they also have a really great customer service team. So
well, there you go.
I bet you
DSG sponsor us.
Yeah, no, I bet the girls that tuned in because they heard Shayna was on here didn't expect to get a whole outdoor wardrobe kind of breakdown there, but
that
I think
could
they'll
be
be happy
another
about
episode.
that. Yeah, exactly. It probably could be, honestly.
I think I actually do have a sizing tutorial. I had so many girlfriends when I bought that first suit last year asking me tons of questions. And so I was like, instead of answering you all individually, I'm just going to throw it on Instagram. And I think it's still in my highlights somewhere. So yeah, I don't know how well they apply to the new suits, but if you're looking for what I liked and didn't like about them, I think that is still up on my page.
Yeah, that could be. I'm sure we'll have more episodes with you as well because there's so much to talk about. So that could be definitely something that we dive into in the future. But I think this is probably nearing an hour or just over an hour. So I guess was there any last minute things that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, for sure. So if you don't already follow the Saskatchewan Sportfish Research Group Facebook page, that's where you can go to find all of the updates on the science side of things. Definitely, we try to post kind of frequently. There's fun pictures and cool stories. So if you're looking on the science side, that's where you can find that. You guys already mentioned my Instagram handle. If you're looking to find me personally, Instagram's probably the best place to do that. And yeah, basically just feel free to reach out anytime. Happy fishing, tight lines. And I hope everyone has a happy holiday and great new year.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being our very first guest here on the Wknd Warriors podcast. That we're pretty excited about that.
We appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.
Yes.
Oh, not a problem.
Thank you very much, Shayna, for coming on as our first ever guest. If any of you listeners have any ideas for who we should have on future episodes, be sure to shoot us an email or DM us and let us know.
And if any of you are looking to add some quality fishing gear, whether that be ice fishing or open water, maybe you're looking to add some things to your spring and summer arsenal, be sure to check out 13 Fishing's website. The link will be in our show notes below. Use our discount code Wknd Warriors and you can save 15% off of your entire order. So be sure to check that out. And thanks again for tuning in, everybody. We really appreciate the support that we've had. This is the first bite of many.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wknd Warriors Fishing Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to leave a review on your favorite listening platform so we can reach more anglers just like you. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for media updates and behind-the-scenes content.